good fortune to attend that summit together with co-chairs, Meg and Carolyn. And it was very exciting because they were talking about the transition to a green workforce and what that takes. And so we especially invited Greg Hanschel from the U.S. Department of Education to come and talk to us about the summit, to give us a little debrief. Greg is the Senior Policy Analyst, and he's in the Office of Vocational and Adult Education. So please join me in welcoming Greg Hanschel.
Well, it's exciting to work on subject matter when there are ideas whose time has come. And it was pretty clear to us when we received the mandate from Congress that the time had come for a real shift in the amount of attention going to eco-literacy and a set of related issues. There was a big conference at the White House a week ago on sustainability in government operations. We knew very quickly after we began to plan our summit, which was in September, that this program was coming on. And there's a number of other things that are coming up over the next year that are sort of tangent to this. And we know that this is a big area. We have a lot of activity that we would like to see happen, and that means that the right kind of conversations need to take place. So one of the first things we did was get together with Teresa and Carolyn and sit down and talk about how what is being done here could work in a very sort of complementary way with the Sustainability Education Summit. One of the ideas that we had was that since there are a number of expert conversations going on in the country right now about building ecological literacy, about climate education, about a whole set of pedagogic issues around that, sustainability and so forth, and that we should try to see if we could braid in together into a large conversation, a discourse that we see as being interdependent. That is to say, there's a set of issues that we need to solve as a society, and they relate to economic development, employment, the economy, how we're going to design things moving forward, the kinds of education we need for youth, for them to be productive citizens, and then how do we begin to start educating both youth and adult pipelines to prepare them for the careers that we know that we're going to need people to be in to bring about a green society. So, and then of course that made sense because sustainability seems to have some core ideas built into it. One of them is systems thinking. So we decided to ask a macro level question. What would a sustainable society look like? What is everybody doing to function within a sustainable society? And then what do each of us need to do in order to help make that transition happen? When I say each of us, we decided to bring in some new key sectors. The first being business and industry. A very important relationship between what business and industry does, certainly in terms of what they demand in the marketplace for their employees, for an educated workforce, and also the technologies that are invested in it. We brought in the advocacy community, people who work on environmental education and many different permutations of that. We brought in educators from elementary, secondary, and from higher education, and then a large set of government agencies who were fostering programs in this, and said, what do we each need to do in order to bring about this sustainable society, sustainable economy, and green economy? And ultimately, what was important to us is what does education need to do? Congress asked us to have this summit meeting, and there was a heavy emphasis in the language about higher ed, but we knew immediately that we can't think of the problems or the solutions in separate, atomized, little independent strengths. We need to have them working together. So we brought these discourses. It kind of reminded me of today, in that we touched upon a lot of issues that are, in a deep way, very interdependent, but not necessarily obvious, at least for people that don't work in this, why they're together. Why do we have a gamer talking about the importance of putting together games? A short while after, we had Mr. Allen talking about, urban farming and food production. But there is a strong relationship between these, and there's an excitement to it in that we're really getting down to something very powerful, very profound. And I don't think that we would have any hope of bringing about the kinds of deep changes we need if we weren't thinking about these broad systems that touch our lives and how to get them working together. So the way we structured this was really to look at education in two ways. One is about ecological literacy, environmental education, climate change education, and that set of issues, which we termed loosely education for citizenship. How do we be good people in society and do our duty to each other and to our world? The other thing that is closer to the mission of my agency is the issue of preparing students for employment, for careers in the economy. We term that building career pathways for the economy. So this was the Summit on Citizenship and Pathways for a Green Sustainable Economy. So those are the ideas that went into it, and so it's kind of exciting when you bring in people, all these different conversations, and try to get them together and see what comes out of it. I think there's enough conversation about the threats that we're facing from the non-sustainable practices that we engage in for it to be possibly rather depressing at times. And what is very exciting and not depressing, in fact, quite inspirational, is to look at solutions. And a solutions-oriented approach is the one that we thought we needed and think we probably need to keep going, because there are some very exciting and wonderful things going on that show so much promise and really are quite energizing. You've heard about some of those things here. What had happened, we had a couple days of conversation. I don't know how much I want to scoop that, report out about that. I'll say something about it. But part of the mandate from Congress was to develop a set of recommendations out of the summit. So we have transcripts, we have notes, we have a consultant working with us to develop out of all those conversations a set of recommendations. And there's a federal steering committee on sustainability education we're putting together. In fact, this meeting this week for the first time to try to translate those conversations, ideas, and so forth into a set of recommendations. How am I doing on time? Do we have a couple minutes? Okay. So let me share with you from that conversation some of the issues that were really challenging and troubling people. And as with this program, the people that participated in that were primarily people who spend their work lives thinking about these issues. Sustainability people from corporations and government agencies involved and so forth. And so we talked about some of the tougher things, and let me share a little bit about that with you. There have been significant investments in recent history on preparing workers in order to do important jobs necessary for, say, improving the efficiency of buildings. And it's hard to generate a workforce for a need for which there hasn't yet been a market demand. And it's very difficult, challenging from a public policy point of view, and for educators to say, because we really need these kinds of workers, that we're going to meet that need by training them when the marketplace hasn't quite caught up. And this was one of the issues we talked about at the summit. There are a lot of, again, good examples of places where people have helped bridge this problem and brought forward good creative ideas. And I don't think anyone would be surprised to hear that many of the proposed solutions look to coordination and planning between business and education to help get that done. There's also a sort of reciprocal issue for businesses who need certain things from the educational environment. They need workers that are ready to move to certain opportunities, and in many cases describe having a problem finding the right people to do that work. So we talked about different ways that we can begin to bring education around to helping serve the needs of business and industry for that. There's a lot of public policy stuff that really isn't centered on the sorts of things that we're talking about here at this conference that we talked about in terms of tax policy and federal regulations and so forth, and I'll kind of skip over some of that. One of the things that I think might be worth spending a moment is talking about competencies. I stood up and asked the gentleman from Milwaukee about the urban farming program to see if, what are the curricular impacts on when you start having students doing this kind of urban food production. And this is, getting towards, I guess I used my question opportunity the way most people do, which is in a way to sort of subtly make a statement, because so much of what's exciting about having these project-based learning and real-world projects is that they become immediately interdisciplinary, and the knowledge that people gain of an academic nature begins to go deep enough that students are forced to try to do something with that. The values begin to shift as the students start seeing the value of what they're creating. So right now, there's been a lot of leadership on these issues at colleges and universities. One of the solutions that our higher education people talk about is the idea of having students in college majors be involved in some kind of capstone course where they're doing interdisciplinary projects that integrate their knowledge and skills and so forth, and demonstrate some practical mastery of that which they've been studying. So I think that has its corollary for younger students, the kinds of things we'll hear about from our plenary speaker today. One of the things that I learned at our summit and trying to talk to experts, a number of people in this room, in fact, about how best to use that opportunity is to understand that there's something other than learning a bit about nature that is special about what we might call sustainability education. I think someone raised their hand spoke a little earlier today about sustainability as being a potential or proposed frame around which we can tie together all these different threads. And it seems that there's some base concepts that are part of sustainability and having to do with systems thinking, life cycle thinking about the entire chain of supply for creation of things, and taking seriously the idea of designing things both and across independent, what would seem to be independent domains of interaction. That is to say, that what we develop needs to work and needs to interact with other systems in a constructive way, whether those systems are chemical, biological, social, economic, political, and so forth. So it's kind of this is the big picture thinking, and I think that I'm convinced from what I've heard that it's going to be an important thing for having the citizens we need in the future to have them become familiar with these kinds of concepts and these kinds of ideas that are at the base of sustainability. Over the course of today, I've been taking notes because I haven't yet found anybody who can sort of lay out what are all these conceptual foundations. And I've been added to my list from what I've heard today. I feel I'm getting a great deal out of this today. I wanted to thank again Teresa and and stimulating program. And if I'm not out of time, maybe I have time for a quick question. Quick one. There's a, you want to holler? Or there's a mic. You have a mic.
Relative to what you've learned about sustainability, did anybody ask or discuss the idea of trajectory? Like, where are we now as a nation with regard to this mecca of sustainability? I ask it from the context of there's ideas out there with regard to tipping points, like peak oil, like climate change. Do we have a tipping point with regard to environmental literacy and sustainability and our nation in terms of kids and science? I mean, I think I just heard that the United States ranks 19 in STEM relative to other developed countries. So how does that all factor into this idea of sustainability, and when do we want to reach that?
Well, I think the question is important, and I'm in no better position than anyone to answer it, except that through the conversations that we've been having, you know, we try to calibrate, especially with a government-sponsored conference. I mean, how visionary can you afford to be before you start losing people? And as we you know, worked on our agenda, and when we tried to figure out from the various constituencies, you know, what people were already sold on as being important about this. And my impression is that, and I guess I started my comments with this, that this idea has arrived in its time. And although we may be still very behind, perhaps other places in the world, I don't know so much about that, but there hasn't emerged, to my knowledge, a strong, cohesive counter-discourse that says, no, this is something we must not do, or, you know, with almost any education policy, there's nothing that's innocuous. But on this one, you know, my perception, at least so far, is that it's a matter of inertia, and that there's a strong emerging consensus. And there are so many good examples to draw from that I think we're on our way.